That heavy glass bowl sitting behind the good dishes in your cabinet, the one nobody's actually used since the last holiday, maybe the one before that. It might be the single most valuable thing on that entire shelf. 10 pieces just like it have sold for real money. One sold for over $19,000. Nobody in that house knew it either. Not until someone finally looked. Here's the strange part nobody tells you about cut glass. It never comes down to how it sparkles. Every single piece throws off that same little rainbow when the light hits it right, expensive or not. So the sparkle tells you nothing at all. It's not the weight either, even though heavy glass feels expensive in your hand. It's not even the ring, that little chime it makes when you flick the rim with a fingernail. All of that is theatre. Here's what actually decides the price. Tilt the piece toward a window and look at the flat underside, the base. Somewhere on that glass, a few letters were etched in so faintly that most people go their entire lives without noticing they're there at all. That faint etching is the entire difference between a shelf decoration and a small fortune, and most of these signatures were etched so carefully that decades of dish soap and dusting never once touched them. This whole era of American glassmaking even has a name, the American Brilliant Period, roughly 1876 through 1917, when a handful of factories competed to cut the deepest, sharpest, most elaborate patterns anyone had ever seen in glass. We're going to tilt 10 pieces from that era before we're done here. Let's find out what's actually catching the light in your cabinet. Number 10. A cut crystal water carafe, heavy in the hand, cut in a dense pattern that throws light beautifully, gets treated as nothing more than a pretty picture somebody's grandmother kept for company. That's a fair instinct, honestly. Cut glass carafes like this were made by the thousands during the early 1900s, and most of them bring somewhere around $25 today, sometimes less. Here's where this particular one splits off from the rest of the pack. T.G. Hawkes and Company, one of the top cut glass houses in America at the time, acid-etched a small trademark into the base of their better pieces, a mark so light it barely disturbs the glass. A Hawkes carafe in their Teutonic pattern, that trademark still intact, stood right around 7 inches tall and sold through a specialist cut glass auction house for $60. An unsigned carafe of the same rough shape and size brings closer to 10. 6 times the price, and the only real difference between the two is a mark most people wouldn't think to look for in the first place. Tilt the base toward a window before you decide it's just a picture nobody wants. Number 9. A small-handled candy dish, faceted all the way around, ends up holding loose change or paper clips and gets forgotten as anything more than a catch-all. Understandable. Dishes exactly like this turn up in nearly every estate sale in the country. Libby Glass Company etched a small sword straight through their signature for a very specific window of time, only between 1896 and 1906, 10 years that narrow things down fast for anyone who knows to look. A Libby dish in their Wedgmere pattern, that sword signature still legible, measured about 7.5 inches across and sold at a dedicated cut and art glass auction for $90. An unsigned dish of similar size and cut brings closer to 30. Libby actually won top honors for cut glass at the 1893 World's Fair in Chicago, beating out serious competition from every major glasshouse in the country to do it. That tiny sword through the signature is the entire reason this dish outranks the nearly identical one sitting right beside it in the cabinet. Number 8. A heavy glass bowl carved with flowers instead of plain geometric facets gets written off as a later, cheaper imitation because the petals look almost too soft and rounded to have been cut into glass at all. That softness is actually the giveaway, just not in the direction most people assume. Toot Hill Cut Glass Company specialized in intaglio work, flowers carved in deep relief rather than the sharp hobstar cuts most factories relied on. And that technique took real skill to execute and is far harder for a modern piece to fake convincingly. A Tute Hill bowl in their wild rose pattern, the maker's signature etched quietly into the glass, ran nearly 9 inches across at auction and sold for $125. A pressed glass imitation shaped like a rose bowl brings around $25. Soft carved flowers on genuine cut glass usually mean a harder technique was involved, not a lesser one, since moulding a soft petal shape into a press mould is easy, and carving it by hand into solid glass is anything but. Number 7. A squat, wide-bottomed decanter with a stopper gets picked up, turned over once, and set right back down for looking oddly proportioned, not tall and elegant the way most decanters in the cabinet tend to be. That low, wide shape wasn't a design mistake, it was deliberate. Hawks built their Gladys pattern specifically as a ship's decanter, engineered low and wide on purpose so it wouldn't tip over on a moving train car or a rocking boat deck. A signed Hawks Gladys decanter, stopper included and matching, sold for $175 at the same November auction that produced several other pieces on this list. An unsigned decanter of similar shape and size brings closer to $50. The proportion that looks slightly wrong at first glance is actually the entire design doing exactly what it was built to do 100 years ago. Number 6. A large round serving tray with what looks like a tiny picture cut into the very center gets admired once at a dinner, complimented politely by a guest, and then relegated to holding car keys and loose mail by the front door for the next 20 years. Look closer at that picture before it disappears into the junk pile entirely. It's an actual engraved scene, a castle, cut directly into the surface of the glass and framed inside an elaborate border pattern, hawks named Koh-i-Noor. A signed hawk's tray with that scenic center intact, roughly 10 inches across, sold for $400. A plain, unsigned tray of similar size brings around $70. Combining a full engraved picture with an ornate cut border took considerably more time and skill than a plain Hobstar tray ever required, and the price reflects exactly that gap in labor. Number 5. A decorative plate, cut edge to edge in a dense geometric pattern with barely a flat surface left anywhere on it, gets displayed once a year during the holidays and boxed carefully away for the other 11 months. This exact pattern is precisely why that's a mistake worth correcting. Libby's Marcella pattern is considered one of their rarer, more actively sought designs among collectors who specialize in this era. A signed 7-inch Marcella plate sold at auction for $550, and a specialist glass dealer has separately listed a similar Marcella plate at well over $1,400 retail, suggesting there's real room above even that auction number. A plain pressed plate made to merely look like cut glass brings around $20. Rarity in the pattern itself, not just the name etched underneath it, is doing real work on this particular piece. Number 4. An oval serving bowl cut in overlapping facets running down every side gets treated as nothing more than a fancy fruit bowl trotted out for Thanksgiving and ignored the rest of the year, stacked with plainer dishes the other 51 weeks. Turn it over before you file it away as ordinary. Libby's Isabella pattern, their sword signature etched quietly into the base, roughly 9 inches across the widest point, sold for $600. An unsigned oval bowl of similar cut and size brings closer to $35. It's the exact same shape nearly every household owns some version of, sitting in nearly the exact same spot in the cabinet. It's a completely different number the moment somebody actually checks the base. Number 3. And this one is barely a single inch of glass. A lone cut crystal wine glass, tinted a faint turquoise blue exactly where the color meets the clear glass in one sharp, precise line, gets treated as one stray survivor from a broken set, worth almost nothing sitting there by itself. That color line is the entire story of this piece. J. Hoare and Company, one of the three biggest cut glass houses in America alongside Hawks and Dorflinger, cut this exact turquoise to clear combination in a pattern they called Croesus, mostly during the 1890s, and it's considered one of their single most valuable and recognizable designs today. A documented Croesus glass sold to a bidder out in California for $2,700 during an early auction of the year. A plain coloured stem without that documented pattern behind it brings closer to $70. One glass. Not a matching set of 8, not even a pair. $2,700 because of one colour line and one cutting pattern, and absolutely nothing else about it at all. Number 2. A crystal vase cut deep and precise all the way around with no visible signature anywhere on its surface gets assumed to be unsigned and therefore unremarkable, just an anonymous piece of pretty glass. Unsigned doesn't automatically mean unknown, though. See, Dorflinger and Sons rarely signed their blanks at all, but their work gets identified instead through catalogued shape numbers and a cutting depth other factories simply didn't match at the time. This exact vase, listed in Dorflinger's own records as Shape 129 in their rich cut line, sold at a specialist Kansas auction house in the spring for $5,700. A generic Hobstar cut vase without that documented Dorflinger attribution brings somewhere around $150. Dorflinger's Glassworks supplied cut crystal to the White House on more than one occasion, a level of prestige most other American cut glass houses never touched. No signature on the glass doesn't mean there's no proof behind it. It just means the proof lives in the shape instead of the base. Number 1. And this is the one piece on the entire list that isn't even a single object to begin with. It's a matched tankard and pitcher set, cut in a dense, all-over geometric pattern that looks, at a quick glance, like any other elaborate cut glass serving set left over from the same general era. Meriden Cut Glass Company cut this exact set in their Byzantine pattern, one of their most ambitious and labour-intensive designs, dense cutting running edge to edge across every single piece with barely a plain surface left anywhere. And the pieces sold together as a genuine matched set rather than getting broken up and scattered piece by piece the way most old serving sets eventually do over 100 years of moves, divorces and inherited cabinets. That matched Meriden Byzantine set sold at auction for $19,550, one of the largest documented prices for this entire category of American cut glass, let alone a single lot at one sale. Everything else on this entire list came down to a signature hiding on one single piece. This one came down to a set that nobody, across an entire century, ever broke apart. 10 pieces of glass. Every single price on this list traced back to the exact same thing. A few etched letters most people never once tilted their glass far enough toward the light to actually see. Not the sparkle, because every piece of cut glass sparkles the same way in the right light. Not the weight in your hand, no matter how expensive that heaviness feels. Not even how loud or clear it rings when you flick the rim. 10 different makers on this list. 10 completely different prices. And every single one of them was decided by the same tiny, faint, easy-to-miss habit of tilting the glass and actually reading what's etched underneath it. Go pick up every piece of cut glass sitting in your cabinet tonight and hold the base up to a window. Tell me in the comments which piece you're checking first tonight and whether it's been sitting on that same shelf since before you can even remember who put it there. Subscribe if you want to see this exact tilt and check process run on the silverware drawer next, because that's exactly what's coming after this, and there's a whole lot more sitting in that drawer than anyone expects. And like this video if it made you want to go check your own cabinet the moment it's over. The next time light catches a piece of crystal in your house, don't just admire the sparkle for a second and move on like everyone else does. Tilt it. Read the base. That one small habit is the entire difference between a keepsake and a check.